Hello, everyone. This is Tommy, World at War Comics, and boy, do we have a special podcast for you today. I'm just going to get right into it. Our guest is Todd McFarlane. That's right, the Todd father, Todd McFarlane, McFarlane Toys, new Spawn movie coming hopefully in 2025, and about 10 new comics coming out in 2024. So we're going to talk about all of that. So I hope you stay tuned. This should be a blast. What a dream come true having Todd McFarlane on. As you can see, I purchased quite a bit of his products. So I'm really happy and excited as a Spawn fan to have him on. But before we get into that, again, Cien Chilies, that is our sponsor for the podcast. Cien Chilies, CIENCHILES.com. Go to Cien Chilies for all your hot sauce needs. And also our good friends over at Comic Crusaders. If you want to read awesome reviews of upcoming comic books, movies, music, or if you just want to watch incredible interviews with some of the best in the comic book industry, go over to ComicCrusaders.com. All right, here we go, everyone. Here's Todd and I hope you enjoy. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. Today, our guest is none other than Todd McFarlane. Todd, thank you for joining us. Man, I'm super excited to talk to you. As you can see, most of my money goes toward McFarlane and McFarlane Toys.
Wow.
Collecting a while. My wife just shakes her head, but luckily she's fairly supportive. Fairly, I say.
Oh, so you're the one that put my three kids through college. Is what you're saying? Yeah.
We've had that conversation before.
Yeah. You might want to save some for your own kids.
Yeah.
Stop giving it to the strangers.
Yeah. No, I'm super excited. Been a fan for a very long time. I'm sure every interview you're on, the person says the same thing. But the 90s were a pretty special moment in comics for me. I'm almost 50 years old, and that late 80s, early 90s, I feel like were some of the funnest times in comics. And when Image came on the scene and everything that all of you did at Image, I think it really changed a lot in comics. And today you look at indie comics, and I feel like Image has a lot to do with where indie is today. I don't know if you feel the same way when you think about indie comics.
Yeah. No, so if we go back, let's just go back and touch on sort of the 80s, 90s, and all the way up to here. When and let's just go to like the beginning of Marvel. So when Marvel comes in, and obviously at that point, and this is the early 60s, DC's well established for about 2 decades, maybe even almost 3 decades.
Yeah.
Everything was sort of routine, right? The comic books went out on the newsstands. People went out to the grocery stores or the drugstore, wherever you ended up getting your comic books, right? And then maybe late 70s, the beginning of comic book stores began, right? And it wasn't until like the early 80s that the very first comic book came out that actually only went to a comic book store. That was Dazzler #1. I was working at a store at that point, and it was like a big deal because it's like, oh my gosh, we're getting a comic book that you can't get on the newsstand, right? Yeah. And so they were trying to help that. And then as the newsstand became sort of less of an issue, then that started to squeeze out at the same time that magazines started paying attention to our industry, right? And it sort of that early 90s, Wizard magazine was sort of like the Bible, right?
Yeah. Right.
And again, we're still predating ourselves pre-internet. This still, which is hard for, I know, a lot of people to understand.
Yeah.
And then eventually, though, then the internet started to come. So it kept that momentum. So we went from the industry as a whole, I thought, from like the 60s all the way to where we're at, was like sort of in a routine. I don't want to say a rut, but it was in a routine for about 3 decades. And then it just started getting a little bit sexier, right? And then in 1988, the Batman movie comes out. So again, the beginning of superhero movies sort of starts to take a bit of a toehold. And then the magazines start promoting it a little bit more, because now you're jumping from comic books to movies. And then the internet comes and kaboom, right? And now everybody can sort of get all their information. We at Image, myself included, we just happened to be in that storm of when of when magazines were paying attention, the movies are starting to come out, the internet comes out. And so it doesn't mean, just so we're clear, it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you're automatically entitled to any success.
Yeah.
It just means that the opportunities expand dramatically.
Yeah.
And those of us that could take advantage of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like everybody right now can, if it's got a voice, can go and put their sample up on YouTube.
Yeah.
But so are 10 million other people.
Yeah.
So now the problem becomes with opportunity
Yeah.
is that it becomes a sea, right? And sometimes you get a little bit lucky, and I would argue that we got a little bit lucky that we were right at the beginning of what was going to become a sea,
Yeah.
a sea wave, a tidal wave. But we were at the beginning, so there wasn't nearly as many of us to compete with, right? And I could argue in hindsight, if we had started Image today, maybe it wouldn't have been quite the glide path that it was back then, because there's just so much talent, so many other publishers out there, so much other options.
Mm-hmm.
We were sort of one of the few options. That whole thing that I just said also would apply to my toy company, right? I mean, the reason we got so much street cred was because we were one of the pioneers to do it, right? And the pioneers will always, even if they, as time goes by, we weren't really the biggest and the best and the coolest and greatest. None of that matters. Mm-hmm. First to market, if you talk to any sort of business school, first to market does matter.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
Yeah. So people go, oh my gosh. So McFarlane Toys will always have sort of a soft spot for people because I was sort of there, and then there's now 50 companies that do what I do. And Image comic books, doing creator stuff and being a smaller publisher, there's a whole proliferation of that. Yeah. We just happen to be, I just happened to be kind of at the right place at the right time, and we had some talent to go with it. So here we are, 2023, and all of a sudden you look back and you go, man, it's been, for me, it's been, I think next year will be 40 years I've been in the business, right? Yeah. 40. Shit. I mean, I thought 20 was cool, but it's now been doubled. So it's been a career, right? It's been a career.
Yeah. Now you've mentioned two different times where you kind of mentioned that you were at the right place at the right time. You could say that the first time with the comic books with Image coming in the 90s, but then the toys in 94. How much of that did you see? Like there was an opportunity that if you were willing to take the chance, we might be onto something pretty great? Or was it truly you all came together and everything that happened around you happened to create the environment that allowed to push you forward? How much was it actually seeing that there was that opportunity?
Well, I guess let's talk about opportunity, right? Yeah. So for me, I've said in the truth, mm-hmm. I haven't invented anything new, right? Yeah. I've done nothing extraordinary. All I've done, and I'm telling you, this is a recipe that has been proven for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. Take a look at what already exists, and just make it cooler, more efficient, better to use, whatever it is. Just add a piece to something that's there. Mm-hmm. And what ends up happening is that then people, if they respond to it, will give it and give you more credit than was actually there, right? So it Image comic book, a couple of things that we did were we went to computer coloring. Mm-hmm. Right. And there were a couple of books that have been dabbling at it, but we basically said, no, we're going to make that sort of a priority. Mm-hmm. And then we went to sort of like magazine paper instead of newsprint, which was basically what they were making newspapers out of. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yep.
All the rest of it, superhero stories, words and balloons and captions on paper, like all of it was, otherwise the format and everything we did was the same. Right. We just made the end product you were holding in your hands just a little bit, glossier to look at, if you will. The toys were the exact same thing, right? It's still plastic in a form. Yeah. What my company decided to do was to make the plastic just visually look look better, right? Now, again, we were making it out of clay, so anybody could have done what I had done. But because you just go, wow, they're making action figures, but this action figure has twice the detail. They somehow are giving you credit that you're doing something more out of the ordinary than you were, right? I was still using the exact same method as everybody else. We were just adding to the method, but because there was such a good reaction to it, then all of a sudden it's good for the career if people want to give you more credit than you do. I'll always take an award, and I'll always take whatever the street cred, because it gets you in the next door, right?
Absolutely.
And to just put a button on it, one of the things, and it's always interesting because people from the outside, and I think this applies to almost anybody, you don't get to really control your fame or fortune, right? Because if it was that easy, then we would just be waving a wand and we would have done it 10 years earlier and 10 times bigger, right? It's like you don't have any control, because you've heard about this, some punk band who's like grungy up in Seattle all of a sudden hits it big, and then people go, you're sellouts. All they're doing is music, and sometimes people were responding to it in a regional fashion, and other times people were responding to it on a international. They don't control either one of those, right? Like, so they're not doing anything different. They're just playing music, and the rest of it is left up to the crowd. So for me, besides I enjoy doing toys and comic books, so it's why I keep doing it. The success part of it, and this is where I think people might not be clear. For me, the success has to be there, not because I need it or I want it, right? Maybe earlier in my career, I was way more driven by that, and the ego was there a lot more. I need it for sustainability, because you can't walk into rooms if you failed the last three things you did. You have to succeed to be able to get to your next sort of, step up the mountain, if you will, to do something artistically. So I can't walk in and go, hey, I did this thing, nobody really cared about it, wasn't very good, but I'd like you guys to help me to do this next thing. It's never gonna work. You have to come in with a success story. And so the success isn't because I need more money or an ego stroke. It's because I need that to open doors, period, out. And that's true across every spectrum of business.
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Well, if we could talk maybe just on the toy side, I thought I'd break up our conversation in three different places, because there's a lot of excitement in these three areas. One is toys, obviously the comics with everything that you have announced for next year. And then the movie, there's been some more news about the movie. The writer's strike is over. We're just waiting for the actor strike to end, right? So it's like you're 50% there, but we'll get into that too. But I thought maybe we could start on the toys, because you're back into sports. There was a little break. What was the reason for the break in the sports? I think you had, was it 2-3 years where you didn't do anything around sports, and then all of a sudden you just out of nowhere come out with these amazing hockey figures that I think are blowing people away again.
It's actually, it was way more than 2 or 3 years, because 2 or 3 years, that was the pandemic.
That's right.
So you got to add years to everything you think, add 3 years to
it.
But, part of it was sports figures as a whole. Sports, I would argue, as a business, outside of the actual leagues, is difficult. I don't care what you're doing, where you're selling hats, T-shirts, whatever else, because there's a regional component to it. Right. Where Spider-Man is Spider-Man is Spider-Man in every state and every country. Right. But you sit there and you go, hey, I'm a Yankees fan. You can't sell that gear in Boston. Right. And you can't sell Packers stuff in Chicago, or vice versa. So there's a regionality in it, and it really came into play. I noticed when we also did NASCAR for a while, and people were like, I'm Ford. I'm not buying any of that Chevy stuff. Right. So they were like brand specific, right? Which is basically you picked your team. It's the same thing. So the difficult, and you know it's difficult because if you look at the people who have been in those businesses, if it was easy, if it was doable, the big corporations would have figured it out, but
Yeah.
they haven't, right? I mean, Kenner had the starting lineup toys for, and then they ended up having to sell to Hasbro, and Hasbro couldn't figure it out,
Yeah.
right? And Hasbro's not a tiny company; that's a Fortune 500 company. So it gets difficult because now you're going, oh, how do we get basically Cincinnati players close to Cincinnati,
Mm-hmm.
where you're fighting with that they don't want the ones from Cleveland. That's even within the state.
Yeah.
And the hardest piece of it is that, especially for the big stores, sort of pre-internet,
Yeah.
you had distribution centers, and there's maybe like Walmart might have like 8, right? But that those 8 supply, usually, do the math, there's 48 states in the continental US, that the 8 then have to supply 6 states.
Yeah.
So how do you put the right number of players in it? Because you want, obviously, when the boxes go to Cincinnati and Cleveland, you want there to be Cincinnati and Cleveland fans. But when it go, that same distribution center also takes the product to Atlanta.
Yeah.
So how, like, and so it was very tough. The easy answer was, we'll just do solid packs
Mm-hmm.
and send Cincinnati play. But big corporations don't get that specific, right? They're not built. They're not built for it. I mean, they're built for, oddly, they're built for seasonal stuff. Like Halloween comes in and Christmas comes in, and but those are usually in aisles that are the seasonal aisles that they sort of come in. They bring in their tonnage program, and it comes and it goes. So for us, we just go, now there's a new world. There's the internet. That, you know, prices have sort of caught up to us because in hockey, the striping and all that was getting really complicated, and we couldn't compete at the prices that the retailers want. But now I think there's enough of an audience and access to it that if you just do it right, and it costs a couple of dollars more, there's enough fans that will support that, right? And they understand that it's like, yeah, that's a cooler product than what those other guys are doing. It shouldn't have to be at the exact same price. So we needed some of those dynamics to happen. Also, in all honesty, we needed to wait a few years for the flushing of the old guard of who were the faces of each one of the leagues to sort of get long in the tooth and or retire, and then the new kids come along, right? Because we were doing Peyton Manning and Tom Brady over and over and over, and now you can come in with Joe Burrow, and you can come in with Patrick Mahomes, and you can come in with, you know, Lawrence and whoever. I mean, it seems like every year there's a new hot 1 or 2 quarterbacks, receivers, you know, the guys that are on your fantasy teams.
Exactly.
That everybody's now paying attention to. And that's true also in baseball, for sure. Like, there's a whole wave of young kids that, you know, I don't have to rely on Albert Pujols and Ken Griffey Jr. again all the time. So that was it. It just sort of, the timing was right for us to come back.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, you also announced a lot of cool news. One was Diablo, which is the new series of figures that are available right now. When it goes into IPs, like, how do you go about, like, do you actively search for the next one, or you just wait for them to come available? Like, what is that process when you're trying to figure out what that next lineup of figures are going to be, from whether it's a video game or?
In all honesty, it's a little bit of both.
Is it? Okay.
So we're constantly looking, studios, and let's just use that term, because that can include TV, movies, and video games and the like. They're constantly creating stuff and looking for people to do it. And then there's the one that you mentioned, which is, we'd like to do it. There's a company that may like us to do it, but they already have an existing contract. They're already in business with somebody. So you're sometimes you have to sort of wait till contracts come up, and usually if the companies, studios, are happy with who's ever manufacturing, they'll renew the contract and they'll just keep going, right? They don't put it up for sale. And then other times, sort of a brand will have run its course. You've seen this dozens of times where I mean, if you're graphing it, it goes up and then it sort of has a natural bell curve, and then it goes quiet for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden people get excited about it again, right? So there's all those components that are in there. So I wouldn't say that there's one formula that's been more successful. At the beginning of our company, we were the complete beggars.
Yeah, you have
on doors.
Yeah,
Please, 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 please. We're new. You don't know us. We don't really have much of a track record, but could we do it, right? And so it was way more difficult. And now, as you can imagine, fast forward, next year will be the 30th anniversary of McFarlane Toys. Yeah. I think our reputation precedes us when we walk into a room. So the question now is, do you want to deal with a company that is going to put out a quality product at a fair price, but might not have a giant machine behind it, or don't you? And those are sort of more of the decisions that the people who are the licensor sort of deal with. Do they want cash, or do they want quality? Right. Yeah. And I've told them, and they know it intellectually if they pay attention. You can't have both. You can't have somebody come in and give you a $50 million guarantee, because they got to make that money back. Yeah. And if they got to make $50 million back, and I'm talking about big sort of corporate companies, the ones that are on the stock market, then they're going to start to pay attention to how much money they're putting into the product, and what's their margins, and what's their profits. And so it's always surprising sometimes when the studios are shocked that they took the cash, right? Somebody backed up the Brinks truck and dropped a few bags, and they took it, and then they're going, yeah, but the product's not that good. And it's like, because they've got to, at that price, the price you sold it to them, they've got to sell millions and millions and sometimes tens and tens of millions of units globally to get their money back. Yeah. So they're looking at it at a different one. So I'm sure they could have made a better quality product, but then you needed to only charge them $5 million instead of $50 million, right? And so I don't know. They sometimes want the cake and eat it too, and I just go, you can't. And I'm quite honest with them. Yeah. If you need for this brand the most money, I'm not your guy. Who the obvious guys and companies are, go to them, right? If you want what I think will be the best product for your brand on the market, I think you're talking to the right guy, right? So I don't know. I'll let you guys decide. And every business that I go and talk to, they're in a moment for that day of either things are going good for their company, things are going average for the company, or things are going bad for the company. And you never know what's happening. I try to do my homework months in advance, so when I go into these meetings, I know what the temperature is in the room of the people. Right. But it shifts fairly dramatically, sometimes from month to month. So I'm at the whim. Look, I said plenty of times, name's Todd, only rhymes with God. I'm at the whim of everything that happens from day to day. Yeah. And our job as a corporation, is to adjust accordingly and not assume that things are going to go our way. We're the ones that have to hit their curveballs, not the other way around. Yeah.
That's awesome. And then as far as DC goes, and the characters that are released on a regular basis, how are those chosen? Are you limited by DC as to what characters, or do you have the rights to anything and everything that they have that they own?
Yeah. So our contract allows us to get into the DC library from the dawn of Action Comics #1. Wow. So yes, we have full access.
That's awesome.
To the library. Then you put in the additives of, sometimes they've licensed their characters out to video games, TV shows, and movies, and those have specific looks, right? Where all the other characters that have come from the comic book library have been drawn by dozens of characters, in some cases like Superman, Batman, hundreds and hundreds,
Yeah.
not characters, but creators, excuse me. But
Mm-hmm.
and those have been done by hundreds of creators over the decades. So
Yeah.
there is no definitive look, if you
Mm-hmm.
will,
Yeah.
right? So you get to be, let me just say, on the comic book stuff that we do, we get to be a lot more creative and like how we want it to look.
Yeah.
Where, as you can imagine, you're doing something that's based on an actual person and or a figure that's in a video game. It has to match that like dead nuts on. Just like when we do any movie, TV stuff, it has to be exactly what the consumer's been seeing with their own eyes, right? Where the comic books, it's more of, as long as you're in the general area of it, then we just get to have the style that we think sort of fits accordingly.
Wow. And then how do you determine how many waves of, whether it's DC, let's stick with DC, how many
Yeah.
waves you do throughout a year? Like, you have a set amount of waves that you already have planned each year and you try to stay within that, or it just depends on what movies are being released, what new comics are being, I'm sure it has a little bit to do with both, I would assume.
Yeah, there's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
So when you get your space at stores, like at, brick and mortar
Mm-hmm.
stores that people go, those are almost a little bit robotic in terms of how they do their buying and when you've got to set the shelves and when you've got to get the product out and how many they're looking for and depending on the sale or lack thereof, how fast you turn that over.
Okay.
Then we've got this other component, which is sort of, sort of what we call non-mass. And
Mm-hmm.
non-mass is way more flexible.
Yeah.
And you can adjust price points, characters, the amount of characters that are in there, the scale. The price is really the big thing because when you're in the mass, they give you a peg and it's got a defined price on it. And you have to, whatever you make, however you make it, Todd, we don't care. It's your problem.
Yeah.
It better match that price. It's got to be that price point, whatever it is. $22.99. Boom, done. Where if we go to the other side, away from it, and we want to add some cool stuff, but we know it's going to sort of mess with our budget a little bit, then we can go up to 25, $30,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay, right? They're not fixed on it. So, Amazon probably is for a big example, giant example,
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones that basically seem like they're doing what the mass guys are, but they actually don't really have any real price constraints,
Yeah.
right? As a matter of fact, they actually don't mind if you come up with something that's a little more expensive because they know that the big box stores aren't carrying those,
Yeah.
right? So
Uniqueness
they
of
like,
things.
yes.
Yeah.
So that's always a value to them too. So it's a moving target. Let me tell you that. We come in with a game plan at the beginning of the year, and
Yeah.
then we adjust accordingly. And the adjusting is whether we pick up new accounts, whether some of the stuff that we do sells, and if that sells, then all of a sudden the phone rings
Yeah.
a lot more from the people who are buying it,
Right.
right? Let me tell you, from the big accounts, you only get two calls. There's only two calls you get. One is, hey, Todd, this stuff is really selling really fast. Can you get me more?
Yeah.
Right. And the other one is, hey, Todd, this stuff is selling slow. How are you going to help me with this? Right.
Yeah.
They never phone you and go, hey, we nailed it just right. We bought exactly the right amount. We got it. Like, you never get that phone call. It's either they bought too little and there's a demand, or they bought too much and now they're getting backed up on inventory. But it's the nature of the beast. We've been doing it for 30 years now.
Yeah.
And you sometimes become a hero or a villain within a month of each other, depending on what the sales are and what the product is. So,
So true.
but again, then you have, like, I think it was last week we came out with the Lobo character on Amazon.
Yeah.
And not only, we've had this happen over the years, a pretty frequent amount of time, where when our toy comes out, it's the number one figure in the action figure at Amazon. And sometimes we've had like 8 of the top 20, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's awesome.
so we do really good. But Lobo, of all the characters,
Yeah,
Lobo came out and was the number one toy.
yeah, yeah.
Toy, like bigger than Barbie that day, bigger than Legos, bigger than bikes, bigger than video games, bigger than Super Mario. Like
That's
for
awesome.
a couple days, it was like the biggest, and
Yeah,
then eventually the reality set in, and all the normal stuff came back to it. But
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what happens if you either have pent up demand and or you've got the right product at the right price at the
yeah,
right time. So and that even somebody like Lobo can
yeah,
climb to the top of a chart.
yeah. Well, I mean, it comes with the hog, it comes with this dog, comes with the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
guitar.
yeah,
There's a
yeah,
lot of really cool things that come with Lobo, and
yeah, yeah.
the rumors that Jason Momoa might be signing on to play Lobo in some sort of a fashion. I think all collectors like myself were pretty excited. We're in like Reddit chats for McFarlane Toys, and everyone was going crazy when the news came out that that was going to drop. And then at 9 a.m. Pacific time, I'm just waiting to hit the button to make sure, because on with Target, with Walmart, with Amazon, with Big Boy Talk Box Store, with Entertainment Earth, if you don't hit that button right at 9 a.m., there's a chance it might be gone.
Yeah.
And boy,
Yeah,
nothing.
it's interesting, Tommy, because like in those instances,
Yeah,
right? It's becoming a little bit of what it used to be like when we used to try to get concert tickets,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
That the big concerts would
Yeah,
sell out in an hour, right?
right.
And you had to, again, pre-internet, you had to be in line, remember, like, and camp overnight sometimes at the big shows, right? But if you weren't in line or whatever, and again, they used to have it, you could phone in. You never got a ticket on the phone in those days. So, but pre-orders and sometimes even some of this stuff, because
Yeah,
nobody knows how successful it's going to be. So we just put in a number, and
right.
all of a sudden it's like, bam, it's gone. And for us to now go back to the factory and manufacture more and bring it over to, even if we wanted to meet the excess demand,
Yeah,
and you're always balancing that, that you just go, it's going to be months and months and months and months and months before that happens. And by that time,
yeah,
they may have moved on to another item that they go, Lobo, that was 6-8 months ago. Who cares, right?
yeah,
So, and you also want to have, again, going to that point, you also want to have a healthy secondary market. You don't want to just meet demand all the time. It's okay. It's
hmm,
okay
yep,
to let people. It's never bothered me to have one of my toys sell for 5, 10, $20, and then somebody somehow got the right toy and they're selling it for 500. I don't care,
yeah, yeah,
right? Either you live in a capitalist society and you just accept it for all of it, warts and all,
yeah,
or not. So it's like, I got my money at the 5, 10, $20. Why am I going to begrudge somebody for basically just being able to maximize? It's like selling their car or their furniture.
yeah,
It's theirs. They can sell it for whatever they want. What do I care? So,
yeah. I fully agree, unless I'm the guy at 9:30 that forgot to sign on at 9, and now I'm buying that $20 toy for $100.
yeah.
So I'm
No, no,
pissed.
no. That's the problem. If you don't get it, it can be frustrating, because then you just
Yeah,
go,
but
oh man, I'll buy it for 20. I don't really need it for 100, right?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
I'll wait a few months. Maybe it'll come down. I can find it for $40 later.
Yeah,
So
exactly. All right, if we can move on over to the comics side,
yeah.
because boy, did you drop a lot of news about incredible comics that we have coming out in 2024. I mean, to drop news of, was it 10? Is it 10 new titles in 2024 or nine?
Um, well, to be clear, what we did was we made an announcement in
Mhm.
both San Diego, and then we
Yeah.
did some more announcements in New York Comic Con.
Hmm.
That like they were announcements,
Yeah,
right? And again, and here's how it worked, just to give you a little bit of what's behind the curtain here.
sure.
I phone creative people that
Yeah,
I think are talented, and then I just sort of, and all the conversations are about the same. I
yeah,
mean, they vary, but they sort of go something like this. Hey, talented creator X. I'm just phoning. It's Todd. Just phoning to see whether you'd be interested in doing anything in the Spawn world. And the Spawn world's getting bigger by the day. Hence these new titles. It's getting bigger by the day. And if you are interested, then you tell me what you're interested in, and I'll see whether I can accommodate that. Not only can I accommodate what kind of story you want to tell, what characters you want to use. If you want to create new ones, fine. But even the speed at which you work, right? Which is different than, I mean, if I come to them and I'm talking about Spawn, the comic book, that book has to come out every month. So that's on a different track. It's like every 30 days, here comes another book, which is why in a couple of months we'll be up to issue 350, right? So that's 30 plus years of pushing that thing down the track. The other one is a lot more flexible. Is the word of just saying, hey, you want to do something? I've got some ideas, or you can pitch me. Let's talk about it. And I'm getting a lot of people coming to me pitching me stuff. And then I sort of go, oh, that would be cool, but I tweak this and this and this because you're doing some stuff that's maybe counter to some sort of big elements of continuity that existed in the last 30 years. But if we can iron those wrinkles out, then this is all cool. And then what do you want to do? You want to do 2 issues? You want to do 5 issues? You want to do 8 issues? Like, how fast can you do it? Because everybody can't turn out a monthly book, right? So, I mean, I would say that only a handful of those are going to be quote unquote monthly comic books, new monthlies, because those are tough. I mean, creatively, they're tough. Anybody who ever goes on a monthly book, I always tell them the same thing. Doing a monthly is going to be the toughest thing you're going to do in your career. But it's also very rewarding because you create a body of work. And all the other ones that we've got we will, as they get finished, as they come in to the office, we then will put them in the appropriate schedule and push them down the conveyor belt, and move them along. And it could come into kind of fits and starts. We're trying to follow and track where people are with everything so that we don't get like 6 in 1 month, so that we're not cannibalizing. It'd be nice if we spread them out. So, but if everybody sort of finishes at the same time, we will have to spread them out, which will then, probably bounce some of these into maybe 2025 debuts. But I also don't want to. I want to be mindful that if I start something, let's say in January, and it's going to run for 4 issues, let's just say, that then I go, oh, okay, so for 4 issues, the retailers get that extra title. And then another one gets finished. Well, let's just start it the month after the 4 issues end, right? And so then there's a balance there. Then you go, oh, they're going to go 4 issues. So now the retailers get 8 months in a row of these books, even though it might be 2 different titles of 4 issues each, right? So we're constantly putting marks on a calendar, as you can imagine, and saying, okay, if this book comes out here, it's going to be 4 issues. Put a red mark, red. Okay, now the next book, where do we want it? And you're trying to even it out and balance it all out so that you're not squeezing the retailers too much, right? And asking too much from them. And then letting the fans pick and choose a little bit, sample a little bit without having to eat too much. But, again, the majority of my books are going to be $2.99, which is the cheapest on the marketplace.
By far.
I try to make it easy for people to sample. And then if they don't like it, okay, no harm, no foul. You're in and out for $3. Okay, cool. So
that's amazing. I had the opportunity to speak with Erica Schultz last week. She was on our podcast, and she's amazing, and she's very excited for Rat City, and Rat City seems really incredible. So she did go into what details she was allowed to go into, but we saw the first images of Peter as that new Spawn in Rat City, and she kind of talked about the process and which the conversation between her and Tommy have been going back and forth, and then she met with you, and I just thought it was awesome, the entire process. And she seems extremely excited about the title. She's been working on it with Shay, and I feel like something pretty amazing is going to happen there. But then, right, we have the Salmon Twitch one. When you shared that, I think that was at San Diego Comic-Con, you mentioned Salmon Twitch, if I'm not mistaken. But the style in which that title is going to be released, maybe you could go into a little detail. That one sounds absolutely incredible. I'm really excited about that one. More of like a detective style.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think has to happen for me to, in a prudent way, grow the Spawn universe, right? Yeah. And I mean, remember I expanded in 2021, right?
Yeah.
That was almost 30 years after doing one book. I mean, again, we had done miniseries and stuff like that. I'm not, so there had been stuff in between, including some Salmon Twitch stuff. But essentially, the only thing that was constant was this one book. So it took 30 years. I mean, think about Marvel. They come out in 1961, and by 30 years later, 1991, I'm 3 years into Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's how much. And not only was Spider-Man not their only title, they had dozens and dozens and dozens. So I've actually been probably way almost insanely conservative in how I've been doing what I've been doing. And then in 2021, then we open it up and we add the 3 titles, right? We started with the sort of the anchor comic Spawn's universe, but then add King Spawn, Gunslinger, and the Scorched, right? And right now we're working on King Spawn 29. I mean, all of a sudden it's up to, like, it's going to be in the 30s here real quick. But I want to like it to be like a flower opening a little bit, right? That I just don't want to grab and choke and I could just put out a ton of comic books and just do it, but I don't think it will be beneficial in the long run. And as you can imagine, since it took me 30 years to sort of get there, I'm a very patient person. I think that the long run of any calculation for me has always been way more successful. I'm the proverbial tortoise, right? Compared to the hare. Right. So so intentionally keeping stuff close to the vest and then going, okay, now that, you would argue that phase 2 would be phase 1, I guess, would have been what happened in 2021 with adding the new book. And then phase 2 is now happening, which is let people like Erica, and she's a good example of, she had an idea, and I'm trying to work as much as I can with her idea, so that she will have as much excitement as possible, instead of me saying, hey, Erica, can you do this for me? Right? And she would still do it, because we're all pros and we've all done that before. Work for hire, we've done it. Sure. I want this to be more of like that she feels like she's the guiding light, and I'm asking her the questions. And I'm only there a little bit for continuity cop stuff, right? And that's it. Now, otherwise, I'm the biggest cheerleader for all of them, but it has to be in a way that it ends up getting a little bit sort of bigger in mind. I have to be mindful about it, because if I pull the lens back to the 30,000 foot level now, right? That is inclusive of everything that's in my world, that's in my orb, that I've been doing either in the last 30, 40 years of my career, or I plan on doing, or what's coming down here. And the one piece that we don't know, the giant unknown, is still the movie component. If the movie comes out and the movie is successful and the movie begats sequels, and we're hoping that all that's true, it will change all of these dynamics significantly. Why? Because the word Spawn now will not be something that is sort of in a bubble, which is, comic books and toys and whatever else. It's gotten out a little bit. It had its time with the movie and a couple of video games and the TV show, and so it's out there. It's not nearly as contained as a lot of superhero characters, right? Lobo, I would say, is like way more in the bubble for the average person walking the street.
Most people know who that is,
And again, Spawn, I think, travels a little bit further, but not dramatically, right?
Yeah.
But if you talk about something like The Walking Dead, that now, because it became an international success,
Yeah.
like you can go to any country, say those words, and people know what it is, right? I again, I'm not here to say that Spawn is anywhere close to that, but if a movie hits,
Yeah.
then it automatically jumps there. Let me tell you right now, if I go next door, wherever I'm at right now, I go next door, and I want to be egotistical. I don't say I'm the guy who does Spawn.
Hmm.
I say I'm the guy who co-created Venom. And
Hmm.
why? Because Venom's had 2 movies
Yeah.
recently, and there's a good chance that the people next door have watched one, if not both of them.
Yeah, exactly.
And so your street cred goes up really quickly because they're like, what?
Yeah.
I watched a movie. Oh my God, you're part of that movie thing. Not really. I mean, the character, whatever, but they just sort of, this is that street cred. They just give you more than you do. So you get in there.
Yeah.
Spawn has a chance, as big as it seems like right now, and it's going good, and it's been a good life to me, has a chance to really
Yeah.
expand exponentially. And if that happens, then everything I'm talking about in terms of toys and video games and all the plans I have for comic books may get altered because demand will go up
Yeah.
across the board, will go up. And then, whoa, what do we have here? Right? I mean, Robert Kirkman, creator of Walking Dead, couldn't hardly keep up with reprinting his comic books when The
Yeah.
Walking Dead, and Robert at that point had about 120, 130 issues, right? By the time the movie comes out, I'll have 360 issues. I'll have triple
Yeah.
to reprint. And this is the piece, Tommy, that I think that my peers are missing. This is the piece that they're missing. You don't have to have 360. That's might be a psychotic number. But what my peers are missing, and I
Yeah.
think they're missing a big piece of it. They all want to sell their stuff into Hollywood, a lot of them. They
Yeah.
all want to make sure that if they do sell it, it gets made and it becomes a huge success.
Yeah.
But what they're not going to be able to do is take advantage of that success,
Wow.
because Robert Kirkman was able to do it because he had 120 issues in the can when it came out. And he was able to exploit 120 issues. And a lot of my peers, I got 360. Shit, don't worry about me. I'll be good forever. Like, but a lot of my peers are like doing 5, 6 issues
Yeah.
and then selling it and
Yeah.
then moving on to another idea so they can sell another idea. And if that idea you just sold does go into Hollywood
Yeah.
and does become big, and let's just say in the best case scenario becomes a phenomenon like Walking Dead, you've got 6 issues to exploit.
Yeah.
You're gonna run out after one trade paperback. You're gonna run out of it.
Yeah.
And the big moment to say, I own this idea and I'm gonna reap the benefits.
Yeah.
You're literally holding
Mhm.
yourself back on it, and it's a shame because all of my peers, for the most part,
Yeah. I've done that.
have been around for not only 5 years or more. Some have been around for decades.
Yeah.
And yet I can count on fingers the number of them that have done 50 issues of their own creator-owned book.
Wow.
I think I don't even know if I got to use my thumb.
Yeah. I mean,
Of the hundreds of peers that are out
yeah.
there. And just so you know, I keep saying 50 issues is the number. If you do 50 issues, that's 4.5 years, right?
Yeah.
If I was in front of my peers right now, hundreds and hundreds of my peers, my first question would be, how many of you have been in the industry for 4.5 years?
Yeah.
Everybody, of course. What are you talking about? Right? All of you.
Yeah.
Some of you have been in for 20 years. You could have done 50 issues with 4 different characters,
Yeah.
4 different times. You could have 50 of this character, 50 of this character, 50 of this, and 50 of this, and you've got none. But you were doing comic books. So you did do 50 and 50 and 50 and 50. You just didn't do them for anything that you own. You did it for somebody else. You're never going to reap the benefits of that,
No way.
right? So, like I'm telling you, if you want to hit if you want to hit the jackpot, it's not co-creating Venom.
Yeah.
It's creating Spawn,
Yeah.
right? Like, but I don't know. There's a recipe. There's a path to taking advantage of all of it, not
Yeah.
only on your day-to-day life, but in outside the bubble. If you're ever lucky enough for it to get outside the bubble, but you got to be prepared to take advantage of it once it goes outside the bubble. But I don't know. I can't see, and it's even more frustrating
Mm-hmm.
when I think about it from writers, because like artists can only do one book a month, and they're so they're kind of confined,
Yeah.
but writers, you can do 2 books for Marvel and 2 books for DC, and you can still do your book.
Mm-hmm.
You could have dumped one of your 5 books for Marvel DC, kept 4 of them, so people still know you're the big shot.
Yeah.
And done your 40, 50 issues of this one over here. It's weird to me. It's weird to me. But okay, cool. They keep thinking that what Robert Kirkman and I have done is not replicatable. I disagree.
Yeah.
I disagree. But
Patience,
if you don't do it, and put yourself in the position, you're right. It is you can't repeat it if you don't basically line up the ducks in the same fashion that Robert and I and a couple other people have done. But anyways, it's their life. They gotta do what they gotta do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned the movie, Todd. I mean, some positive news have come out, right? The writer's strike is over. How far along are we on the screenplay? Is it done? I've read some articles that it was 80-page done, and you've gone through that, and then you were only 30 or 40 pages away. I don't know how true that was, but are we close to the writing?
So the 80 pages was like pre-strike.
Oh, got you.
Right.
Okay.
And now we're off the strike. And then as soon as the strike was over, I talked to the writers, and they go, we're diving right into it. So we're, by coincidence, like this week, we're all sort of circling back and seeing where we're at. And so we're that close to the finish line for that, right? And then again, there may be notes and rewrites and whatever else. So you have to factor that in. Hopefully it's not extensive, and we can get through that fairly quickly. And then at that point, maybe and it's part of the conversation, we attach a director in advance. And then the plan is to then go into the studio and say, this script, those actors, that producer, myself included, that director, this is the team. And oh, by the way, you people in Hollywood, all of these people except for me. These are all your peeps. And they're high level peeps. So there it is. And this script, this is a go project. We're not here to develop. We're not here to sell you. We're here to say, who wants to make this with these people, and whoever is the winner, we could start pre-production 6 seconds after the contract is signed, right? We're gone. We're ready to do this. I mean, which is why, a couple times in the last month, Jason Blum, who's the co-producer, if we get this off the ground, it's saying that because he's made enough movies. Again, he was promoting The Exorcist and was promoting Five Nights at Freddy when people come in with their, hey, what about Spawn? And he's made movies enough that he just knows the timing. Okay, if we get this done now, we get this done, we sell it into Hollywood, we get into pre-production, we go into production, we do our editing, we actually do our marketing, we get the trailers out. Could we have it out for 2025 Halloweenish? Yeah, sure. The answer is yes, of course. But everything has to go. I mean, we have to get actors first, so we got to get past that not insignificant piece, that we have to have access to the actors. But if we can, and they can settle that, there's still time, right? But if the strike keeps going, then all of a sudden the calendar year 2025 gets pushed out for a potential release time, right? So anyways, that's that's it.
Yeah.
We keep inching, and then pandemics and strikes keep coming. And I just like, oh my gosh, Hollywood's tough enough. Let me tell you, Hollywood's tough enough without those components. But you add that on top of it, I'm very thankful that I have a day job. Let me just tell you. So
Yeah, for sure. And then is the plan, has it always been to release during October for Halloween? Has that always kind of been the plan, that time frame that nail, or not necessarily?
no, we're just using that as a general, because again, we're hoping that it'd be, R-rated sort of creepy movie. So it sort of fits in that era. But
Sure.
again, somebody we're going to partner with the studio that's going to, put up a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
They're gonna have something to say with it. I mean, they have their schedules too, right?
Yeah.
We don't know who's going to win the contract and what movies they have in their pipeline. So we'll act accordingly depending upon, and that may be part of the negotiations. Even if somebody says, "Hey, I want to do it," we're going to say, gun to their heads, "Hey, well, when can you release it? We want a release date." And they're going to tell us then whether they can accommodate it, because they may offer the most money or the best deal or whatever else, but they may not be able to get us into the marketplace for 6 months later than somebody else. And that may not be something that I want to do one way or the other, or other. So I don't know. When you've got a lot of people involved and you try to let everybody have some input into sort of the final deliberations, good, bad, or indifferent. And if it all, let me just tell you, if it all sort of blows up, right? If it all blows up, I've got people waiting on the sidelines right now.
Yeah.
That will cut the check right now. And I go back to my original plan. I write, produce, direct it myself, and we're off to the races. So I've been trying to do it in the method of being a good team player in the system of Hollywood, right? But I can tell you I'm getting impatient.
Sure.
And I just, so something's going to happen. We're going to make an announcement next year, and it's either going to be we're doing it the way that it normally is done, or we're just going to go to plan B, right? But I'm not going to keep waiting. I'm not going to keep waiting and wait. I'm just getting older by the day, right? So it's just it can be a frustrating thing, but we'll see. Jason Blum once said to me, and it was one of the most frustrating things he said, but in hindsight, it was pretty accurate. He just said, "Todd, a movie gets made when it's ready." Right. And I thought it was cavalier of him, because he makes, 12 movies a year. So I was like, "Jason, you got 12 kids. It's easy for you to just say, you got 12 kids. I got like one little baby here. It's called Spawn." And so maybe I'm looking at it differently. But as time went right, he was right. Right. He was right that it's like, if you try to shoehorn it into a place and the marketplace isn't ready, then you're doing a disservice to yourself, right? And so I've been holding him back now for over 20 years, 25 years. And it's like, okay, just, you can be a little bit more patient, Todd, to see during this vetting process whether this is the right way to go, and how it all works. But everybody's hopeful. Let me just say that when I talk to the writers, and I talk to the actors, and I talk to the producers, and everybody's still on board, and everybody's still enthusiastic. They just know that because the pandemic moved so many things, and then the strike came in and disrupted that movement, that there's just a little bit, you're kind of in a NASCAR race, and you've only got like 2 inches to make your passes. So there's not a lot of wiggle room. So you got to be very smart about what we do, and then we'll see how we go. Hopefully we sell a multi-picture deal. So we can come out and not only say, "Hey, thanks for the wait, everybody," but the payoff is you're going to get more than one movie, right? So I don't know. We'll see. All that's yet to be determined.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. I mean, there was some good news, at least last week in the news, about the writer's strike possibly coming to the end within the next week or two. Again, that doesn't mean anything, but fingers crossed. Because once that's done, right, I think that is the trigger that allows all the conversations to start taking place, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And even oddly, somebody from my PR division sent me something, and like for one day they had what's trending on one of the big social apps, and Spawn was one of them.
Yeah, oh, for
Like
sure.
it was weird. Like why? Like we didn't really make a toy announcement or a comic announcement or like whatever, but it just must be what I'm hoping for is that the accumulation of all of it, that the whole is better than the parts right now, right? So anyways, we'll see.
I think the conversation around the movie has been going on long enough that also I think fans feel your frustration and kind of sharing that frustration, like, hey, we want to see another Spawn movie. So I know that conversations have been going on because news did come out not too long ago, specifically around Jamie Foxx, possibly Jeremy Renner. So when you start throwing those kind of names out, and I don't know if that's still the case, and maybe we shouldn't talk about it because of the strike, but I mean, that creates a lot of excitement, Todd, when you start to have those kind of names thrown at the Spawn movie. And then Jason Blum comes out, and he was pretty adamant this movie will release in 2025. I don't care what anybody's saying; it will release in 2025.
I think he's getting frustrated too, and
Yeah, for sure.
he lives in this city. He's used to it. And
Yeah.
yeah, we're like I said, there's a lot of positives now. We get past the strike. It's hard for me to imagine that there's any breaks on us at least doing what we want to in terms of making the sale. The question is, can we make the sale? That's to be determined, right? But luckily, like I said, I've got plenty of backup plans. But again, can we do it within the system, because that gives you arguably the best chance to succeed on a global level, right? And the value there for me isn't that I got a bunch of money off the movie. It's that the brand grows, Spawn grows globally, right? And that and there's a big value there. And then add the other component to it, which is sort of complicating some of the conversations, is what about the Spawn universe? Because as you can imagine, if you sell Spawn, nobody's going to want to put up a lot of money for Spawn and compete with that word, right? So I'm not going to be able to do medieval Spawn TV shows. I'm not going to be able to do Gunslinger live actions or any of that, right? I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm going to have to freeze this universe over here, right? While this thing is going through. But at some point, then this has to run its course, and then the Spawn has to get put into the Spawn universe. Tough to ever sell a Spawn universe without a Spawn. And for a while, those conversations were dramatically separated. But now, because of pandemic and strike and Hollywood sort of being in flux, that what seemed like we just keep them, we're now having discussions. Do we talk more grander, and or do we separate them, or whatever? And if we do tie them together, how does that work? How would that even work, right? So I'm sort of vetting and negotiating all that, because I mean, look, just so you know, and I'm going to educate everybody in Hollywood here. Just in the Spawn universe, there has been, because we've made a list, we compiled a list, over 1,600 characters have passed through the doors of Spawn, the Spawn universe, mostly the Spawn comic book. 1,600. Now, let's be fair. Some of those are lawyers and cops and regular people. They're not all a character, right? But there's still a significant amount of characters that you and I would sort of consider to be sort of action figure worthy, right? And as time goes by, and we were to do, let's say, 3-4 Spawn movies, that could be over the course of 10, 11 years. That number, in my brain, is only going to double. And that may be conservative a little bit, because we just announced 12 books, and all those books are going to be bringing in characters, right? And so this number is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So, if I don't know, this is the conversation I have to have in the city in a meaningful way of, are we talking about Spawn, or are we talking about something bigger?
Yeah.
And if we're talking about something bigger, what does that mean, given that some of them are still in their infancy?
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, if you can't figure it out and we go to this plan, then by the time that runs its course over 8 or 10 years, then I'm going to have double, if not triple, the amount of characters. And when we come over here and we talk about the Big Apple, then that cost is going to be way, 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 way more significant than it's going to be today. So how do we solve all this? I don't know. Maybe an unsolvable problem. A good problem to have, but a problem nonetheless. But it all of that will hopefully sort itself out here and in the coming months. Hopefully, maybe even the first quarter of 2024, I'll have some more definitive answers. The one that the fans need, the only news the fans need, really, and it might even be boring news when they get it, is that it's sold. Here's the studio, and we're going into production on this day. We're making a movie, right? That's it. No, stop the talking, Todd. Stop all the hype. Stop all the bullshit. Just tell me that it's real. And then, oh, by the way, I don't even really care about that. Let me know when there's a trailer I can watch.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. I think it'll be exciting news for most fans.
Oh yeah. No, well, again, I'll be there on the sets. I'll be able to do behind the scenes stuff. So I'll be able to sort of create the hype all the way through it. So yeah. We'll have fun. We'll have fun. It won't just be like announcement, wait for a trailer, right? A year later, right? We'll be able to have fun. But all the little tiny stuff, like, we're over. It needs to be real. I think the next big announcement, it just needs to be real. So.
Yeah. All right. Last thing, Todd, I know I've taken a lot of your time. I know you're aware, but there was a Spawn Con in Denver.
Yep.
And my friend Ty, who goes by the Spawn Hunter, who I think you've talked to before, he was one of the group that put that all together. And I think he worked with your team to make sure everything was okay. But they had a blast. I don't know if you had a chance to see all the pictures, but there were so many artists that were there that have worked with you on Spawn, including Tom, who is the legend in lettering. He was there. Tom Healy.
Oh, Tom Orzechowski.
Yeah.
It's
pretty cool, man. It was awesome. I can't wait to get my my Spawn Con coin for the inaugural, but I don't know if you had a chance to kind of look it up or even had time to kind of consider it. But
I had a couple people. In my office. My editor-in-chief went there.
Yeah.
And then Brian Haberlin, who's done work for me over the years, he was there because it was a pretty, I don't know what the final guest list looked like, but I know that early on I looked at it and it was like, oh my gosh. I mean, like a lot of people who've sort of touched Spawn in some way creatively over the decades. So I haven't really dug my head into it because, again, I wasn't part of it. I was sort of complete. I was like Switzerland. I was completely neutral. The only interaction I had with the crew that put it on was, guys, you just have to do this legally proper, right? You can't use my images and my characters' names and what you can't do. And you can do it if you're just doing it for fun. But once commerce becomes part of it, the rules of engagement change. And I don't want to take any of your money. I don't want any of your money. But you need to get approvals for all of this. You need to be compliant. So let's get all of that sort of taken care of. And I think it'd be better for you too, because they were doing like knockoff logos and knockoff. And I go, it's too close to it anyways, because I'm obligated to come after you and flick you in the ear legally. So why don't you just ask for the approval and get the real deal? Yeah. Right. I'm not endorsing one way or the other. But it just seems like if you're going to try and do something, I get the real stuff. right? I
Yeah.
don't know, it's me, but that's it. And again, we were able to sort all that out, right?
Yep.
And just sort of, so it's an experiment,
Yeah.
right? And it's sort of, so the question is, will it grow? And there's a mechanism for me to get involved both on the sort of the business side of it, if you will, to
Yeah.
make it potentially official,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Absolutely.
right now it's a fan-based thing, good, and God bless all of them. And make it official so that then I can endorse it myself wholeheartedly. Oh, and by the way, I could actually go myself.
Yeah.
That would matter,
That
right?
would matter.
And so, but again, it was the first step in an experiment, and we'll see where it goes. We'll see
Yeah.
where it goes. You know, I may stick my nose into it a little bit deeper, and I may not. And if not, then I don't know if they're planning on doing another one in the future. I haven't had that conversation one way or the other.
Yeah, I think there's definitely desire to do another one, and there is a large desire for you to be more involved. So it's really just your schedule, and with the movie coming out and so many titles, like we get it. But I just talking to Ty, trust me, there's extreme interest on both of those fronts, Todd. If
Yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, Tommy,
I think you know that, man.
I know myself, and I know my personality too much,
Yeah,
right? That like, that if there's going to be ever a quote unquote official Spawn I have to be
yeah,
involved in what all of those decisions
yeah,
are, because at the end of the day, it becomes a reflection on my brand, and at some point
yeah.
through me myself too, right? Where if it's a fan base thing and it goes good or bad,
Right.
I'm hands off,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I'm hands off. Where if I'm then in it in any official capacity, I don't know if that will ever happen, but then it's like me putting out my comic books or my toys or anything else,
yeah,
then I go for the ride, good, bad, or indifferent,
yeah,
right? Because like, if you don't like my toys or you think we're doing something wrong, I have to listen to that, right? And act accordingly or not. But at least you can sort of point your arrow in my direction, right?
yeah,
And I don't mind that. Actually, I prefer that, right? I
yeah,
prefer, if things are going to go south, that I had something to do with the decision making, because then I don't like passing a buck. I don't like blaming other people. I like to just go, oh man, just, you know what? I thought we had some of the right answers. We just made a miscalculation. Our bad, right? But this is sort of the growing process of doing anything that you basically expose to the public, right? None of it is going to be a home run every single day.
no.
So you hope the batting average is, you do way, way, way more right than you do wrong, and you call it a career, right? So
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, Todd, thank you so much for joining me today, man. We covered a lot. I really appreciate you. Big fan, obviously.
yeah,
I cannot wait for all these things to come out, and we're all your Spawn fans around the world really are cheering you on. And man, if there's anything we could do as fans, please let us know.
yeah, sure. Tommy too, and I sort of said this to others, but I think it should be said almost every single time.
Hmm.
The collective group of geeks, of fandom,
Yeah.
is is a it's a big community and a big team partnership, right? So I think it's a little bit too easy for people to sort of put their gaze and give credit to people that are on the sort of the celebrity side and stuff like that. So I get lots of it, and
Yeah.
and I guess some of it's deserving stuff, but I think the fans' input and what people like you are doing in terms of keeping the conversations alive, and including people that maybe have a curiosity about things, all of it is meaningful,
Yeah.
right? So So you're right. I may have a big audience, but part of that audience is because of the things that people like you do. So I encourage you to just you keep going strong too, bud, because we're all in this together, right?
Yeah.
We all succeed or fail as a community of geeks.
Yeah.
And I think it's good. Again, when the San Diego Comic-Con got big,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of my comic book friends that were like, it wasn't like it used to be. I was okay. To me, the more people in the tent, under the tent, I don't really care the reasons. It's a tent called fandom, geekdom.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
more that there are, it's good for all of us. It's okay. There's no downside for people paying attention to fantasy. And
Yeah.
so, those that do everything from give us their hard-earned money and then go into chat rooms, and
Yeah.
then those that create it, and everybody in between, and you're the in between, that
Mhm.
you're one of the conduits. I appreciate the things that you and your peers do for us too. So thanks. So
No, thank you, Todd. Appreciate it, my friend. Have a good one.
all right, you be good.
Thanks.